Hi, Sharen Seitz here on the Anthony Rogers Show.
Hi, Nadia North here at the Anthony Rogers Show.
Republican Anthony Rogers has no previous political experience. Rogers, a comedian, is well known for a podcast called The Anthony Rogers Show.
Hey man, this is Tommy Chong, and right now you're listening to The Anthony Rogers Show.
Hey all you cool cats and kittens, it's Carol Baskin, and you are listening to The Anthony Rogers Show.
Hey y'all, this is Kevin from Candlebox. You are listening to the funny man Anthony Rogers.
Hey, my name is Alex Sulkin, writer of Ted and Family Guy, and you're listening to The Anthony Rogers Show. Lucky you.
Welcome back to the greatest show in the entire universe. Today we have guest host Nadia North.
Hello.
And then we have a guest with a crazy story. It's probably why you clicked on this. You already read about this. But Sharen Seitz was a former member of the Family International, which is like a...
Correct, Armageddon Sex-𝗂𝗪.
That's insane. That's like quite the buzzword headline, but you had to live through that, so it's kind of crazy to think about. Like I caught the story in the Daily Mail, so if you're like listening along, she's easily to Google for her story and stuff like that. But so how you were born into this cult, basically?
I was born in Osaka, Japan. It was one of the biggest organizations there for well-known abuse, and I had stayed in it until about 6, 7 years old, and I have many siblings who were in it for much longer.
Are they still in it?
They are not. We did escape around that age that I left. But for the most part, what's fascinating about leaving a cult is you can physically go, but mentally is much harder to kind of, adapt to the world that you don't know anything about.
That's crazy. So how did you escape?
Well, it's interesting how trauma works with so many of us having different memories. My particular memory was that something happened to me in specific where a leader of one of the houses, and there are many houses all over internationally, this one happened to be in Colorado, and the leader of this particular house beat me pretty good in a couple ways to where I was so black and blue all over my backside that my dad took notice. And not to say my parents were perfect in any way, but for some reason this got to him. And next thing I remember is at least a couple of days later in the middle of the night, we got into a motorhome, snuck out in the dark. And that's the last thing I remember is we left that night.
That's crazy.
I'm not sure how we got through the gates. I know a lot of these houses were they were gated, they were isolated. We were up in the mountains at that time.
No, that's just crazy. So tell us a little bit about this cult, like from your perspective. Because I could Google it, but it seems like they sound like they parade themselves as Christians, but they don't seem very Christian. But from my perspective, like what is your perspective of like this cult and stuff, the Family International?
Yeah, sure. No, and I dove into, behavioral science therapies when I got older to kind of just make sense of a lot of it. And now I'm more of a counselor and getting into psychology. And so I understand more just looking back. And for the most part, this extremism, that's what I'll come back to that word specifically because we can go into the religious part of it. But this is really just like a conspiratorial theory, extremism mindset that we see in everyday life, except this was extremely dangerous and incredibly secretive and very methodic in how they stayed secretive. The beginning of it started with just simple missionary work that was Christian based. It was genuinely off of the Bible, and they would preach and do missionary work all over the world. The leader, David Berg, he actually started just becoming a little more egotistical, started seeing things as, I have this huge following, I can do more with it. And it's fascinating how, it jumped from, a handful of people to thousands of people so quickly. And I've been asked, why do you think that is? And it's fascinating how easy, and we kind of see that in today's world all over the place, how easy it is for people to fall into communities just to feel like they belong. And when, they sign up for ideologies, it kind of becomes identity, and you kind of just can't get out of that at that point. The brainwash becomes so ingrained, and you want to believe it so badly, you want to be a part of something so badly that it just becomes your reality, and everyone around you continues to validate it.
So do you think it started off with like good intentions and then it became corrupt with like through like its power and like influence and stuff?
I do. I think that the beginning, I'm personally not religious anymore at all. But I do believe that the initial idea was to spread what they believe to be God's word and the Holy Bible and stuff. And they really wanted to help people in their own way. But again, when it started morphing into the leader more so thinking of himself more so like a king, as opposed to some kind of, like prophet, it kind of just kept graduating into this. In the Bible, kings had multiple wives, kings did this and that. So he got married again. He had his original wife that started it with him, and then he brought on a new wife. His old wife didn't love it. She actually left. The new wife became someone, Sharen Seitz. She, Zerby, I apologize. Sharen Seitz, she became someone that took over when David died. And she actually became quite the influence in general, and she's still out there actually. So it's fascinating. I found out recently that not only is it still absolutely continuing on in the world, I've seen some of their content recently, and it's just beyond disturbing how, people will absolutely look at that and see the good in it and continue to sign up. It's very upsetting.
That's crazy. What do you think about this, Nadia? You got any questions?
That's insane. I'm sitting here listening to your story thinking you're such a survivor. And it's great that you're coming out and talking about this. So hopefully other, people who maybe are in the same situation can look up to you and have the courage and strength to leave also. So I really commend you for doing that.
Thank you. I appreciate being on the show and for you all to invite me, because I really hope that at least one person, if you can give them a voice, just to kind of say, okay, that clicks with something I'm going through too. Maybe I should speak up. That would be amazing. I was just telling Anthony before we started recording that I'm actually part of a massive group. It's unfortunate, but over 700 of us Xers that are part of a group on Facebook. And that's just those of us who want to come out and communicate with others. Most of us are very, very fearful to be seen as someone speaking out of the group because there has been repercussion. And other ex-members have warned me of that as well, because current members don't appreciate what we're talking about. So it's a cult that absolutely is dangerous, not just within, but when you leave.
What do law enforcement say about this? I mean, are they involved, or is there any kind of investigation?
That's a great question. Very good question. So when I was 17, and people can YouTube this, it's, I suggest being prepared and taking it in doses, but it's still on YouTube. There's a video of who was supposed to be the new leader. He was kind of his Jesus. David, before he died, wanted an heir, and he was too old. So his wife did what is called, it's a program within the cult called flirty fishing, where the women will go out, have sex with multiple people, sharing God's love. That's what sex is. And try to get pregnant so we have more in the cult and we can, serve God with these children. So she did that. She got pregnant, and it was now his son. And as he went through absolute horror show where his mom physically and sexually abused him, unlike anything you can imagine, which we'll go into, he became so, obviously traumatized that at some point he actually left. And he was very young. He was about, I want to say 18. And so he left with a girl that was from a different cult, and they tried to make a life in the world. It didn't work because of all the trauma he's been through. When you come out into the world, it's like, I don't know what rent is. I don't know what gas is. I don't know how to drive a car. It's like, you were born again. So he went through horror shows, and most of us Xers go into what we do know, which is the sex industry or something like that. So all of that to say, at a point he cracked, and he created this video where he's eerily calm and loading ammunition with knives on the table and all of this stuff. And he's talking about what he went through and recording it. And when it ended up, a murder-suicide, and he was looking for his mother, which was interesting. But he ended up finding his caretaker, and it was a murder-suicide. And what that video did was brought attention internationally to this particular cult. And before that, it was strategy of, you had your bags packed, you knew what to say, you knew where to hide if any authorities came to the door. Most of the strategy was also everyone in the cult had Bible names. You had a biblical name. So no one knew each other's real name. So if you were to leave, you couldn't actually say, this person, you don't know who they are. So there was a lot of little strategies they had. We had our safe cars ready to go, all of these things. So that it was very difficult to catch on until this video was put out.
That's crazy. What was your name in the cult?
Since I was more at the end of everything in Japan, I don't remember if I had a biblical name, but I do remember my older siblings having biblical names. And I remember when we came out into the world learning what their born names were, because apparently, so 4 of them weren't born into the cult, they were brought in. And so I remember thinking, oh, okay, now your name is this. Like, it was very confusing. So it's fascinating to think back. Yeah.
And for like listeners that haven't done as much homework as I imagine we have, like what kind of things did this cult like do to people in general that are just like evil, I guess, and like terrible or whatever synonym, like give like the listener or viewer like a kind of an idea of like what went on here, if you could.
Sure. Yeah. So a lot that I remember is, so my family in particular were kind of used more than others, considering we had a lot more talent of like singing and dancing and such. So they would find particular kids who could do certain things to go out and do what we called witnessing, which is just basically we'd go to old folks' homes and fire homes, fire stations and such, and sing in like outfits and stuff like that for donations. And we would, have our own coloring books and our own tapes and all of these things that we created in the cult, which was actually out of the facility in Sweden. So there was a whole production behind all of this. And when you were behind closed doors, the content that we were given were very different than what the public could see and what we had for them. It was coloring books and photos and, just books in general of older men and women sleeping with younger children and teaching them with like little word bubbles, like, this is how you love God, this is how God loves you, and touching each other this specific way is what God wants you to do, and stuff like that, specifically between adults and children. But they absolutely would also promote and encourage children playing with each other, which became, it's fascinating to also understand, like, even without touch, even without direct content to that child, watching all of that is psychologically incredibly damaging. So those that, I'm a second generation, those are third or fourth that perhaps didn't see or go through certain things that the older ones have. They may have experienced it within the same room or something like that, and it did a lot of psychological damage as well. So there was a lot of just openly sexual behavior, naked people around, wife swapping. It means sex to share God's love means I want God everywhere with everyone. And so that was the theme. And specifically with children, that was David's kind of focus. He loved younger children, and he believed in the children being, our future of the cult. And so I actually am, I feel I'm associated with his granddaughter on that group of 700 people, Davida, and she's just so precious and sweet. But it's amazing how many of these much older, the first generation, we've had multiple suicides, drug addictions and alcohol is just the same thing to me. They die of that. That's a slow suicide. These are the common outcomes. And so to see so many, first generation survivors, not only a part of the group, but also some of them speaking out, it's encouraging. And that's what inspired me to come out, because I couldn't imagine some of the things they've seen and gone through. I mean, some of their stories is, it's hard for me to hear. My older siblings, it is their story to tell, but I do know that they have, they experienced quite a lot of sexual abuse. for myself, I have memories that are blocked in between 4 to 6 years old. And I've done so much trauma therapy and somatic therapy to understand what possibly could have happened in that time. And I understand also this is common with most survivors. There's chunks of memory that goes missing. And that's obviously for the brain to survive. But what we saw wasn't just this, sex around us and being taught to us in books and videos and things like we'd sit around and talk about things that just made it a very comfortable subject. It was encouraged, it was promoted, it was demanded. So it wasn't just like, oh, this is amazing, this is what we do. It's like, no, you do this, not just see it, you do this. And we want you to be saved. So if you don't do this, you're going to hell, kind of thing.
Do you think that this has affected you now in relationships? I mean, how do you feel now, like in a relationship? I'm just curious.
No, great question. I personally have struggled immensely throughout my life with relationships. I mean, my dad also was abusive, but not sexually, thank goodness. But throughout my life, I gravitated towards very dangerous situations. Absolutely. I went into certain adult industries like stripping and webcamming, and it was easy for me to be totally comforted and empowered by it, because when you have been, that way for so long, specifically by men, treated that way, you kind of feel like, oh, okay, I'm empowered by being this person. Now they're kind of listening to me. And that's very common. So to get out of that mentality took a lot of help for me. I sought a lot of help. I did a lot of schooling. And even to this day, I can find myself coming back into the habits of like, oh, those are red flags, but I'm still attracted. So it's fascinating. I have the awareness so I can make a choice, but it's still very much in there. It's affected every relationship I have, from family to friends, romantic and otherwise. So holding relationships, I think, has always been the hardest for me, considering relating with others is almost impossible for the majority, for the most part. And I don't like inflicting my story onto others. So it can be very difficult to maintain relationships. Absolutely.
I mean, this is a personal question, you don't have to answer it, but do you have children now? And if
I don't, but I do have an array of nieces and nephews. I think there were like 20 of them now. And I don't personally want children, but that, a lot of people ask me, is there a correlation, like, because where you came from? I don't actually know, because I have 8 siblings and they all have children. So I think for me, my job is to heal my child first. So that's just my journey.
Wow.
That's a lot. I think you covered like a lot of stuff there. Like, that's like insane. And God, you have like that. You have like hero energy for being able to overcome that stuff. I mean, I think a lot of people be way more messed up. And I'm not saying it doesn't affect you, but I think like, I mean, it's crazy you're still on Earth with all this crazy stuff happening. A lot of people can't even deal with like high gas prices. I couldn't imagine like actual problems and like having to fight through them. I mean that's insane. And like, I mean, and like you to kind of backtrack a little bit, you said this kind of took you away from religion and like God and Christ and all these things like that. Like, see, that shit pisses me off. I was like, I feel like they used it negatively though, and not you
Absolutely.
personally, and tweet your own beliefs, but like I feel like they use this like negatively and like use like God's name and Christ's name like for evil, really. And I think they just kind of like,
oh, absolutely,
it's insane to me.
Yes, no, absolutely, I agree. I hear this a lot when I'm speaking to actual believers, and it's like, I'm so upset because it just ruined things for you. Perspective. When I got out of the cult, I was still very much Christian, and I started seeking actual Christianity. I lived in Texas. It was like a Bible Belt. I got into communities, and then I started realizing I'm kind of curious about other religions. So I started studying world religions. And at the end of just all my studies and everything, I realized I'm more of an agnostic atheist. I believe in the power of belief. If it's real to you, it's real. So for me, I find a lot more peace in that than anything else.
Well, yeah, to each your own for sure. And I couldn't imagine, like, I mean, I get why you'd get there. I mean, I totally can see that. It's just kind of crazy, man. Like, it's just like, that's just so nuts that like, that's even happening,
Yeah. And it's, oh, sure. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what kept you like your mind so that you were okay? Did you escape somewhere mentally? I mean, how did you deal with all of that?
Yeah, no, I learned again looking back, that I had a lot of disassociation. I would just kind of
Imagine.
cope with what I could in the moment. And I think that's, the memory blocking was that on, on drugs. So I do have memories of certain things kind of dealing with it where I was in a freeze place. I didn't know how to act or feel or anything. And as I go into that sort of memory and reflection in my therapies and such, it's fascinating how what I would have done or what I wanted to say or whatever it is that comes up is just so much more than what I was able to do because I was freezing. And there were times that I would see injustices that I was actually someone who got, hit and beaten quite often because I wouldn't just comply. So I was kind of a troublemaker as a kid. And one of the only, if not the only I can remember, would be like, okay, you did this to me for something I didn't earn. So I'm going to go earn it and do it again. And that was kind of my mentality as a kid. So I got beat up a lot. But when I saw certain things, it was difficult for me to just be quiet. So I got in trouble quite often. And to me, it's almost a badge of honor because it's nice to kind of remember like I was a fighter from the beginning. It wasn't just I got sick of it one day. It was like, no, I questioned things since day one and they didn't like that. So
I think that's why you're still on this planet. Like your fighting mentality. I mean, just like that. I mean, I think that's everything. Why you're a free person talking to me right now. I mean, I think I mean, without that fight, you'd still be in that thing, even if you thought it was wrong or knew it was wrong or, it's like, that's how I feel
no,
anyway.
it's
Like,
true. And that brings up a great point because a lot of people that want to leave and have family in the cult that don't want to leave, it becomes really, really heartaching because I could have stayed even as a kid. A lot of us could have stayed. I remember being told my mother didn't want to leave, and we're not close. She actually has a cultist mentality. She's continued since then. But that's all. It's fascinating because there's a book, one of the first that came out from an excerpt that's called "Not Without My Sister," and it goes into that where it's just like you may never ever see those people again ever because they're gonna be gone once you will never see them again. So it's complicated. Like I may want to leave, but I can't leave without them. So I don't know what to do, and you stay because of that.
Yeah, it's literally starting over. I mean, like you said, you have to learn life. I mean, you were very, very sheltered in that bubble, in that world. And yeah, I can't even imagine. That's so hard. So,
Yes, exactly. Well, I
yeah.
appreciate that. I'm proud of, the people I speak to that are first generations. It's just amazing. They can be mothers, they can work these things that, people are like, oh, you have a village to help you, or you have the government or things that can support you. For us, it was like, I don't even know if I can survive the pregnancy mentally. I don't know if I can survive seeing the baby. There's just so much going on. Am I a mother? I needed a mother. Like there's so much. So to see like successful parenting, it's miraculous. I have no idea how people can do that. So I'm in awe. It's pretty
So if someone
amazing.
wanted to help, is there a place that they can donate to? I mean, is there some sort of area that people could help, or
That's a great, great question. I think what most of us, our goals are that speak, the ones that speak out, like Amy Brill in 60 Minutes. She's a great, great person who gets people together. She'd be the one to know that, but I've not heard of that. I think for the most part, the awareness is our focus, where we just that's the only thing we can do. The cult is out there fighting us still. So there's not much else we can do other than speak up. And I have a friend named Dawn Watson who was in a Netflix series called I'm Not Your Guru, or documentary with Tony Robbins. That's how I found her. And we've connected since then. And she's actually works a lot with survivors, and she is creating a documentary, and she travels a lot. So I would also speak with her too. But between the two, Amy Brill and Dawn Watson, those two would be the ones to talk to. So thank you for the question.